Welcome back to Small Caps. My name is Kerry Stevenson. Today, I'm giving you a little bit of a Christmas gift, ladies and gentlemen. A little bit different. Well, it's actually not that different. I'm talking to Dr. Daniel Tillett. He's the Chief Scientific Officer and Executive Director of Race Oncology and really easy ASX code, RAC. Now, why am I giving this as a Christmas present? Because I reckon they've flown a little bit under the radar, and I'm excited to bring Daniel on today because it's not only Chief Scientific Officer, but he's also, he's a shareholder in the company. He really believes in what they're doing. They are way ahead of the pack, ladies and gentlemen, way, way, way ahead of the pack. So we'll unpack it. We'll see who gets to the finish line in the race oncology. But it's really exciting, Daniel. Thanks for joining me on Small Caps, and I guess Merry Christmas as well.
Thank you. Yes, Merry Christmas. I'm looking forward to it. I can tell you it's been an amazing year. Next year's going to be even more amazing, but this year's been just unbelievably busy.
Well, I want to unpack it a little bit, and there's lots and lots to talk about. But before we get into that, can you just give us kind of like the elevator pitch of who is Race Oncology?
Okay, so Race Oncology is what's known as a precision oncology company. So we have a lead drug called Zantrene, which is targeted at cancer, and also has what's also known as heart protection effect, which is a very recent discovery for this drug. It's been around for a long time, this drug, and we're rediscovering it and discovering all the opportunities that exist with it and bringing it back to the market. So it was a drug that was originally developed in the 1980s, failed for basically corporate reasons, as drugs sometimes do. It was lost, and we've been rediscovered, and we're bringing it back. And it turns out to be a much more exciting drug than anyone could have possibly imagined, including myself.
Well, okay, so let's talk about it, because that is who Race Oncology are. It's Zantrene is this drug, which has a couple of different uses, but that's your focus.
Yes.
Why this one? How did you find it? Because you just mentioned that it was around in the 80s, but they were going at it the wrong way. How did this come about? What did you guys see, and why did you resurrect it?
So I wasn't the founder of the company. I have only been with the company for a couple of years. I came in as an investor a few years ago when the company was really in dire straits. Their strategy that they had to bring it back to market had failed. I came in and we kind of reorganized the strategy and said, okay, we've got a fantastic drug. We need to go about it in a different way, and kind of rebuilt the company around this new strategy. And then we got really lucky in a couple of different things. It was discovered by a group out of the City of Hope. They screened 260,000 drugs that had been from the National Cancer Institute drug library. And because our drug had been worked on in the 1980s by the National Cancer Institute, it was in that library. And they were looking for a drug that inhibited a particular enzyme called FTO. It's a protein that's in cancer. It's really important for cancer. About 15% of all cancers have this protein being overproduced, and it makes any cancer that has this cancer being overproduced makes it sensitive to what's known as an inhibitor, or a drug that targets that. So they screened this 260,000 library, and they found that our drug Zantrene was the number one most potent drug to inhibit this particular enzyme. So this was a group completely independent by us in the US, working away. They were interested in this pathway, and they discovered that our drug turned out to be the case. They published a paper. I read the paper and went, wow, this is unbelievable. How lucky am I?
Did you read that paper after you became a shareholder? Was that?
Yes, yeah, it was after.
Wow.
So I came in, I saw that there was a lot of interesting properties about the drug that had been kind of missed and I thought that if we actually went back and used modern approaches, we could actually do a lot better than what the original investigators had done in the 1980s. So,
Daniel, just at this point, I think it's important for people to understand that you actually have a PhD in molecular genetics.
Yes.
And you've also got a background in biochemistry. So, ladies and gentlemen, he's not just an investor that came in and went, oh, I've read a paper. You actually also have started biotech companies. You've invested in them. So this is an area that you fully understand and are fully immersed in.
Yeah, exactly right. So that's how I ended up coming to Race in the first place. So when I'm actually mostly an investor in the resource sector, but because I'm an investor in the resource sector, other investors always ask me about biotech companies, and so I didn't know. I had a fairly negative opinion. The grass is always greener on the other side of the fence, I think. Yeah. And so I came to Race by doing due diligence on all the listed ASX biotech companies. And when I found Race, I found an enormous amount of material to do due diligence on. So the average amount of time taking me an hour or two to do full due diligence on most companies. I got to Race, I probably spent 50 hours going through all the old literature. There's just so much information about the drug. And at the end of that, I became convinced there was something really special in this drug. The company was in a really dire straits at the time. The share price was, below 5 cents. They were running out of money, and I rang up the CEO and said, are you interested in somebody cornerstoning your next raise? And of course they said yes. Who wouldn't be? We did the raise at a premium to the market, so we did it at 6.6 cents, and try and turn the sentiment around and then rebuild the strategy of the company. And since then it's grown. So we've gone from a market cap when I came in of around $3 million, and we're now over 500 million. So it's been quite a ride.
And by the way, just to put that in perspective, you came in towards the end of 2019?
Yes. So it's in the last 2 years, all of this. So the company was originally listed in 2016, but it really had a struggle getting any attention or getting any notice by the market.
What were they doing wrong? What have you done right? What's been the turnaround? What do you think has been the main catalyst for the turnaround?
Well, a lot of it's luck. Like the City of Hope stuff, I can't claim any credit for it. Nobody in Race can claim credit for it, but we can claim credit for identifying when it happened and then changing the strategy to take advantage of. So if someone comes along, it's a bit like, I guess, probably Chalice is probably a good example of this. They were a gold mining company.
I know.
Exploring in Victoria. I happened to be a shareholder. I thought that was a great opportunity. And then they went out to Western Australia, put down a hole in an hour out of Perth in Julimar.
Unbelievable.
They find the biggest platinum deposit in 20, 30 years that has been found anywhere. And you just go, it's a combination there of luck, but also management focused on looking at the opportunities and making sure that when an opportunity comes along, go with it. And I think we were kind of similar in that space. As we saw there was an opportunity there when it came out. This publication came from the City of Hope, and we said, this is unbelievable opportunity. We'll pivot the company to focus on this opportunity, and off we went. And we changed the entire strategy of the company to take advantage of this opportunity that came our way. We could have ignored it and just continued doing what we were doing previously. But we said, no, this is such a fantastic opportunity, and off we went.
So just unpack that opportunity for us. So City of Hope had done their bit.
Yeah. So this turns out to be an area that's really newly discovered in cancer. As I mentioned before, about 15% of cancers in this have this particular pathway, and it's super important for resistance to other treatments. So when this pathway gets activated, the cancers become more aggressive and they become resistant to treatment of other cancer treatments. The cancer stops responding, and that's ultimately why most people actually die of cancer. It's not because when they were first treated, they were okay, but then the cancer comes back, and when it comes back, nothing responds to anything. So that's and this pathway underlies that resistance. It's only been discovered in the last few years. Huge amount of scientific papers going on in this space. It's a really hot and exciting area. There's a lot of large pharma deals going on with what you would consider competitors. But we happen to have the best drug in the class, the first drug in the class, and the most clinically advanced. So we're 4 or 5 years ahead of everyone else in the space.
So if you are 4 or 5 years ahead in the space, I'm sure that you're possibly big pharma is coming to have a bit of a look-see at the moment. How do you envisage what's the news flow going forward for shareholders and for those that are watching today thinking, okay, your share price at the moment is $3 plus, $3.23, let's call it, as we go into Christmas. $500 million company. What's the next steps for you? What's the news flow? Where's the opportunity for investors?
Yeah, so our news flow, our share price has grown on the size of the opportunity. That needs to be de-risked. And the way you de-risk a drug is you take it into the clinic and you prove this is the case. Unfortunately, while our drug's been used a lot, it's been in almost 60 clinical trials, 1,500 patients. We know a lot about safety and how to use it. In this particular application, it's completely new. And so we're going into the lab in 2022 to take advantage of that and prove that out. And that's really where you get the maximum return for a shareholder. So big pharma, while they will come and invest early on, they'll do it at a large discount because they'll say we're taking a lot of the risk. If you can prove it out in the clinic and show this is real, yeah, it's great to say, well, yes, you've cured mice of cancer, wonderful. But if you can show that your drug works in humans, that's what people want to know, and that's when the huge deals get done.
Is that the next steps? Is that your strategy going
Our
forward?
strategy is, and has been always, is we're focused on taking the opportunity that we've been given and taking it to a partner that can take it all the rest of the way. So we don't have the ability to run hundreds of clinical trials like large pharma can. If you take someone like Merck, they've done something like 1,200 clinical trials for Keytruda. And they can afford to do those many trials. They test every single cancer opportunity under the sun. We don't have that ability. We're a small company. But while you have the ability to prove it out, show the innovation, and then large pharma steps in and says, okay, we'll take it the rest of the way. Thanks for this. Here's a huge check for you and your shareholders. Off you go. And that's certainly our strategy, is to build out, generate the phase 2 data that will support that opportunity and take it all the rest of the way.
Which I think is great, and it's important to note that you're about a 10% shareholder in the company, so you are very conscious of where the strategy is going, how the money is being spent. Just quickly want to touch on the fact that you've just closed out a heavily oversubscribed share purchase plan. I think you had 44 million coming in, and you scaled it back to 29.7. I'm keen, and so are my listeners, to know where is that money being spent. And it was a very specific sum, 29.7. So talk to us about that. And clearly there's some very unhappy people that didn't get allocated.
Yeah, there certainly are. The people complain, why did I get scaled back, or all these types of things. That always happens whenever you're oversubscribed in anything, and people really want that. It's been something that people really trying to get their hands on cheaper shares if they can. That's going to be spent mostly in 3 different clinical trials. So the first one of these is to take this opportunity that we have in FTO, expand that out into what's called solid tumours, particularly in melanoma and clear cell renal cell carcinoma, which is a kidney cancer. So that's sort of our lead indication to take that through phase 1/2. To prove out that. The second one is for around a new opportunity that's just come out of effectively nowhere, around cardioprotection. So it turns out that our drug not only targets cancer, it also protects the heart from damage by other chemotherapeutic agents.
Well, now that is massive, I would have thought, because you give that chemotherapy drug, which kills the cancer cells, but then you end up with a heart that's got a problem. Is that correct? And you can't fix that.
No. Once you damage your heart, anyone who's had a heart attack or suffers from heart failure, it's permanent. The heart doesn't regenerate. So once you damage it, even slightly, you're stuck with that for life. And so it's really common for cancer patients to get treated, cured of their cancer, and then die of heart failure. And a classic example of that is in breast cancer, where more breast cancer patients die of heart disease than they die of breast cancer.
Are you serious?
Yeah. It's something not well known. Unfortunately, that's a side effect of these drugs. They're really effective at treating the cancer.
Yep.
They're really damaging to the heart. And so we happen to have a drug that not only targets the cancer better, what we call synergy, so the 2 drugs together. So you take an existing drug that works really well on the cancer, you add our drug to it, Zantrene, it kills the cancer better. But it also, that combination prevents the chemotherapeutic drug from damaging the heart. And so that's a really amazing opportunity. And that's completely independent of this other opportunity we have going after the FTO or M6A pathway. So really, really amazing opportunity. It's an existing market, really large. About 20 million doses of the anthracyclines are used every year. It's very cheap. It's been on the market for 60 years. It's the sort of backbone of all cancer treatment. No one's found anything that's an improvement to that over the years. So people have tried, but that's already there. So we have the ability to just have an add-on to that and provide and overcome the worst aspect of this particular treatment. So really amazing opportunity. We're going to be doing a clinical trial on that towards the end of 2022. So that's the second part of what that money was raised to. And the third one is to expand. We have a phase 2 clinical trial starting early here in Australia in AML, which is acute myeloid leukemia, which is a nasty leukemia that you don't want to get if you can avoid it. Not that I can think of any leukemias you want to get, but Acute myeloid leukemia is a really nasty and very difficult to treat cancer. And we're having a trial of that here in Australia. We're going to expand that into Europe. And all of this is aimed, this is our pathway to approval. We think this is the fastest way to get the drug onto the market, get it approved. And in oncology, it's really important to get your drug onto the market for any indication, because the majority of oncology drugs these days are used what's called off-label. So you might be licensed for acute myeloid leukemia, but the doctor, you prescribe it for melanoma if they think it works. And so a lot of drugs are used that way. There's no longer just what it's licensed for. So
is that right? So that they might just turn around and give you something completely different.
Yeah, it's very, very common these days. In fact, the modern way of treating cancer is to look at your cancer, work out what particular sensitivities it has, which drugs it will respond to. Doesn't matter. So you might have breast cancer, you might have a drug that's used typically with, prostate cancer. And if your particular cancer happens to have a sensitivity to that drug, they'll give you that drug. And it doesn't matter that it's never been licensed for breast cancer. They'll just be able to use it, and it's called off-label use. And in oncology, that's the sort of the way that most drugs are actually used, is they've never been licensed for the particular indications they've been things. So it's really important to get your drug onto the market. Then you can start to sell it, and you can worry about, and then off-label use can become a huge market. And many drugs, the indication they're licensed for is a tiny fraction of the sales of those drugs.
So you've done this big cap raise. You don't need to do another one. You're fully funded to get through these next, clinical trials, etc. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. So we're fully cashed up. As a shareholder or a new shareholder, you don't have to worry about, or is there a capital raise coming, which for biotech, they're like, resource explorers. They're always out there. The next capital raise is always around the corner. We're cashed up. We don't have to go back. We have a strategy of being really, the reason why we got 44 million, but we said we needed 29.7, and that's what we needed, and we only take that. So right. We run very lean. We only raise when we need to, when we raise the bare minimum. And that's the consequence of our strategy of, we're really focused on the shareholders. But It's also something, because as a major shareholder, I don't want to see myself being diluted down. I'm not getting my salary is basically nothing. Where I'm going to get a return is through my ownership of the company, and I don't want to see myself diluted down unnecessarily. So I'm really focused on return for the shareholders, because that's where I'm going to make a return.
I love to hear that. What's going to stop a big pharma coming in and saying, do you know what, let's grab it now before you get some more value from shareholders?
Unfortunately, nothing. So the best we can do is hope that we get the opportunity to prove out and get but ultimately, if someone was to come along and offer, I don't know, $6 a share, maybe, half the shareholders will accept that and take the money and run. You just never know in that space. Like, for me, it's not going to be, I'd be fine personally, but, I would like to see us take this as far as we can, prove it out to phase 2 and see the return that the shareholders really deserve. But ultimately, it's in the hands of the shareholders. So
well,
if they believe in it, they can say no to an offer.
There you go, ladies and gentlemen. There you go. So if you're a shareholder listening to this, you can say no if it comes along. But it's early days.
Exactly. But first of all, always a potential at any stage with any company. If you're a public company, you're always an opportunity, particularly if you're a mispriced private. You might think, oh, well, it's $500 million. It must be overvalued at this point. Do you think that you're overvalued at this point? No. I was buying on market just recently. I've been adding, even though I have a ridiculous amount of shares already, and far too heavily from a rational point of view to justify having so much of my wealth tied up in one company. It's hard to do, but from the perspective of what the value and the opportunity that I know as an insider, then I think that we're not even close to getting to where our true value is. And I think there are other examples on the market, that are similar stage to us, that have much higher valuations than we do. So I don't think it's unreasonable to think that we're at the beginning of the process. We've gone through the first stage of growth, and there's a lot more growth to come. All right. Well, speaking of, not left the station.
The train hasn't left the station, ladies and gentlemen, but everybody knows this is how I like to finish up. Daniel, we're running out of time. What I want to know is all of our listeners out there that are investors, big investor audience, what are the 3 reasons that you think they should be sitting up and taking notice? You've had a good run in the share price, sitting over just over $3 at the moment, market cap close to $500 million, just over. What are 3 reasons you think now is the time for even new investors to come on board?
We've got an amazing opportunity the market has not yet fully valued. So we're the first in class, best in class, and leading clinical in a particular new space that's just coming through that's really hot. Large deals are being done by our competitors with preclinical. There's none of that's actually built into the share price yet. Second thing is we've got this new cardio or heart protection aspect, which has only just come through, hasn't really been built into the share price because of the SPP cap raise kind of has put a cap on the share price. They always do. And so that's still, the growth of that is still not being built into the share price yet. And the final one is, which is probably the most important, is we've got a management that's focused on the shareholders. You can have the most fantastic opportunity in the world, and if the management's no good, or the management's in it for themselves and not looking after the shareholders, then you will lose. There's been, in the resource industry, there's how many resource companies have had fantastic resources, and the shareholders have seen none of that. It's all gone. It's all been dissipated. It's either through incompetence or something's happened. And so management's just super important, in fact. And we really are, as a company, really focused on our shareholders, protecting our shareholders, raising the bare minimum we need to actually do what we need to do, and not diluting, and making sure that we communicate our strategy as clearly as we can. So I think if you talk to many of our shareholders, that was the thing that really stands out about Raise, is the way that management goes about its relationship with its shareholders.
Well, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you today, Dr. Daniel Tillett, Chief Scientific Officer and Executive Director. And if you remember, ladies and gentlemen, right at the start, what Daniel said was he did due diligence on all the biotech companies in the space, and did 1 or 2 hours, but he did 50 hours on Race Oncology. Not only did he come on board as a shareholder, he's now their Chief Scientific Officer. He's got a very strong background in biotech. He knows his stuff. He says that they're only just getting started. So, as I said at the start, ASX code is RAC. We hope you enjoyed this interview. Daniel, great to talk to you. Thanks for joining me on Small Caps today.
Thank you, Kerry.